Hello and welcome to another edition of The Conversation right here on News Central TV. I am Rita Omodia, and on this program we get to discuss political stories around the African continent. And today on The Conversation we will look at the rising insecurity in Nigeria as the president's convoy on their way to Katsina was attacked at the same time when terrorists also attacked the Kuje prison, with every member of the daredevil terrorist group, Boko Haram, and other inmates released. It's also Independence Day today in Malawi, and we will be looking at how far the country has grown economically, structural changes, independence, political transition, and inclusive government. We'll also discuss tensions between Rwanda and DR Congo as DR Congo continues to accuse Rwanda of backing the Congolese M23 rebels and recently halted all trade and cooperation agreements. Right now begin discussions in Malawi. As located in southeastern Africa, Malawi celebrates their independence July 6 every year, which is today. Also known as the Republic of Malawi, this country was formerly known as Nyasaland. Malawi gained independence from the United Kingdom in 1964 until such time it was under the colonial rule of the British. Malawi is nicknamed the warm heart of Africa because it is home to a very friendly community. Over 80% of the population engages in farming and invests the most in agriculture compared to other African countries. Malawi also depends significantly on tobacco, where 70% of exported revenues comes from. It possesses two sites on UNESCO World Heritage List, which are Lake Malawi National Park and the Chongoni Rock Art Area. And now join us live for this conversation. We have Mbauwo Chavula, Country Manager, Women in News WAN-IFRA. She joins us from Blantyre, Malawi. It's so good to have you join us, Mbauwo, on the conversation. And I must say that Malawi is such a beautiful country.
Thank you very much. We are indeed celebrating 58 years of independence.
All right, Mbauwo, let's start discussions now. If we go back in history, back in time, by 1891, Malawi reformed to become the British Central African Protectorate after British sent a consul to the land in 1883. Now, what were some of the trigger factors that led to the struggle for Malawi's independence?
I can say that we had some Malawians, the Nyasalandians then, who were now going to school. They had been sent to the UK, to America, and they were actually now knowing and understanding that we needed to be independent. And also, I understand that the Second World War, we had some Malawians who had gone to the World War in other countries, and they saw that the white people who were ruling then actually bled and died just like them. That stirred up independence as well, because they saw that the both of us, the blacks and whites, were human, and we, as the people from Nyasaland, were needed to go and fight for the British. So that stirred up the bid for independence, when the people realized that we are equal.
Now, with 58 years of independence from the British colonialists, what does this day signify for a lot of Malawians today?
It is supposed to be a day of remembrance, a day of pride, a day when we understand that we are free. But it is also coming at a time when we are having a lot of inflation, a time when we are having not necessarily political turmoil, but we are in uncertain times, and also a bit of stagnation. So it is not one of those days when we were really enjoying ourselves. In the past, there were celebrations, big celebrations, but for today, they were very muted. We only had a prayer breakfast.
Oh, okay. Now, if you look at the history of Malawi's independence, one name would come to mention, and that's Dr. Hastings Kamuzu Banda. And earlier on, you mentioned the fact that there were a lot of people who were studying in the European shores, and when they came back, they sought for independence. Now, he joined the first president. He became the first president, and he joined a host of Africans and formed Nyasaland African Congress, NAC. Now, how would you describe his administration, and what were some of his achievements?
The Nyasaland African Congress morphed into the Malawi Congress Party, And we have to also know that there was a rift within that party. By 1966, there was a cabinet crisis. So the political problems that we have did not begin today. They began in 1966 when Dr. Banda became president after having been prime minister. He had to forge his own way forward. And by 1971, he was named life president. So at that time, it became a one-party state. And that was a bit problematic until 1993, when the wave of change actually just had to come. And 1993, there was a referendum for democracy. 1994, there was the first democratic election when Dr. Banda was ousted from power. So you can...
Mbauwo, can you hear me?
Understand that from 1964 up to 1993, the MCP, am I clear?
Yes, you can. Continue, please.
Am I clear to you?
Yes, please continue.
The Malawi Congress Party that had once been the Nyasaland African Congress became a one-party state in 1971. So it had a grip on power on its own as a one-party state from then up to 1993, when the winds of change blew and the people agitated for democracy. So 1993, there was the referendum. 1994, we had a new government under President Bakiri Muluzi.
Okay, rightly, you talked about Banda, this president for life, and a one-party state. Now, if we take it back to 1994 right now, when we began to see multi-party democracy since 1994, what has been the progress so far in terms of political structure, formation, and ideologies of parties? Because Dr. Banda was categorized as someone who was operating a very aggressive autocracy when he was in government.
By 1993, I think the people were just determined to change the government. It did not matter who became the president. They just needed a change from the regime of Dr. Banda. That was the MCP at that time. So anyone who was available, I think that time there was Dr. Muluzi and Mr. Chakufa Chihana, the late. So the people just had to change. And the UDF then, that belonged to Dr. Muluzi, came into power. So that change, after that euphoria of change, the people then realized that after change, what next? So 26 years ago, the people changed the government. But when we look at things now, we can say that we are now, maybe that growth has reached that point where it's no longer growth. You're just there now and say, what next? After democracy, what next?
Okay, now, during the colonial era, there were complaints of a lot of Europeans taking over the infrastructures created, and that's what necessitated the independence in Malawi. Has there been any progress in terms of inclusive government? Do we have administrations now in Malawi that have become more responsive to development needs of Malawians?
That would be subjective, I guess, because when we look at the infrastructure, most of the strong infrastructure that we have now, like the universities and the big buildings and roads, those were built by Dr. Banda. The other president who was really into infrastructure was Professor Mbauwo, the late. And unfortunately, his reign was cut short after he died in April of 2014 or 2012, yes. So the people are always complaining about the infrastructure and stuff like that. And I believe that we have not yet reached the level that we are supposed to be at this particular moment. When you look at the fact that we've been independent for 58 years, people are complaining that we don't have much to show for those 58 years of independence than we should have. So we are not yet where we want to be as Malawians.
Talking about nothing yet to show yet, despite 58 years, we know that Malawi is very strong in agriculture, but somehow we still see deficits from it. It's been ranked as one of the countries still struggling to reach this attainable economic growth. Now, what have been some of the major challenges in inhibiting Malawi's economic growth?
Our problem was that we were relying on tobacco as the main thing that would bring forex to us. And you know that there's an anti-smoking lobby across the world. So tobacco as our mainstay has been having problems for the past about 5 years when there's been a shutdown across the world where people have these anti-smoking lobbies and they don't want tobacco anymore in their country. So we're looking at new alternatives now. As for maize, maize is our staple crop, but then we're also looking at the fact that government has had to subsidize small-scale farmers to make sure that they grow their maize as they should. So the AIP also, that is the Agriculture Input Subsidy Program. It is also not working as well as it should be. It has so many challenges, but definitely as a country, we should be looking for a way out of tobacco, because across the world, unless we're looking maybe to the Eastern markets, but our traditional markets in the West, it's not as good as it should be because of the anti-smoking lobby.
Anti-smoking lobbies. Now, if you look at leadership going on, we've had presidents, about 6 presidents going on in Malawi. But there's a particular contentious election, which was the 2019 elections, which resulted to nationwide protests. We saw opposition leaders disputing results in court, and finally it was cancelled. What were some of the issues of the 2019 elections?
The main issue, I should say, it was TPEX, the anti-correction fluid. So the people were saying that these elections, the people were actually using correcting fluid to determine who had won the vote in that particular thing. Of course, there were many other areas where people were complaining to say that maybe the former ruling party had rigged the election because of the use of TPEX. But you also have to understand that we were not fully computerized. So this manual counting was what we have been relying on for the past, since democracy in 1994. But for this particular year, that was 2019 up to 2020, the people felt that maybe it was a bit too much. You find that the TPEX has been covering everything and there was no credibility whatsoever. So the people just had to fight for a rerun. And you know that the fight was particularly in the streets, where the people were complaining, the people were demonstrating throughout, I think 3-4 months nonstop, until the issue went to court, and the Constitutional Court had to declare that we had to have a rerun.
Now, what was the effect of this protest going on? We see a particular election being overrun, and then we see another election being contested in 2020. Now, did it have any effect on Malawi's political structure?
It definitely did, because this was the first time that the people had actually protested and gotten results, because the people were determined to go onto the street until whatever they wanted was achieved. And indeed, the court, and for the first time, the courts were open. Everything that was happening in the courts was publicized. It was all on most radio stations and even TV stations, and people could see and hear for themselves until the 5 judges went to determine the outcome of the case. And of course, that was really a game changer, because they also talked about the 50+1, which Malawi adopted to ensure that the next president had the majority, because the others had been complaining that you cannot have a president with the 25%, 31% of the vote, and you say that this is the will of the people. So with 50+1, the people were now certain that these are the guys that we had wanted into office, and these are the ones we've put into power.
Now, from Asen's Banda, Malawi had Bakili Muluzi, we had Bingu Mutarika, who died in office, like you rightly said. We also had Joyce Banda, who took over. Then we had Peter Mutharika, and now we have Lazarus Chakwera, who is coincidentally from the formation party, which Banda was, which is the Malawi Congress Party. Now, earlier in January, Chakwera sacked his entire cabinet over grave concerns, vowing to confront all forms of lawless conduct by public officials. How would you score his administration so far, which has been based on fighting corruption?
I think corruption has been the very biggest issue for this particular government. We've had these issues of corruption in high places, where even up to now, our vice president has been implicated. The issue, he has said he will fight it in court, and we are waiting for that. But definitely, this is the major issue for this particular government at this point, and how these cases actually get resolved is what will determine the next course of action for this government, because we look at the fact that people are watching very keenly to say this has actually affected the presidency. This has affected people working in State House. This has affected people in very high places in the Capitol Hill, that is the topmost civil servants. So how the courts determine this and these particular corruption cases would determine the course for this government, because we're looking at the fact that we're having elections in 2025. This year is halfway done. These cases, they're out in the open. People know who has been implicated and who hasn't been. So how the government or the judiciary resolves these cases will definitely shape the course forward for Malawi as a nation.
And Mbauwo, looking at determination and political willpower and the fact that the people are looking forward at Chakwera and seeing all his policies, we also know that there were austerity measures that Chakwera put in place. I think we also had you earlier on when we discussed this austerity measure. So how far has it gone? Because we saw Chakwera try to limit government spendings, especially when it comes to government officials traveling outside the country. How far has it gone? Has there been any progress?
There has been progress, and the State House has actually taken measures to ensure that we know the next journeys that the president is going to undertake. I think so far there are only 2 in the next 2 or 3 months for the president. One trip to Zambia, to the Unga, and another one else. But definitely there has been a moratorium. We're not seeing people move as much as they used to. And even those who are moving despite that moratorium on travel, they're actually more cautious than things had been, because things are out in the open now. So people are watching very keenly to see how the government actually works on those issues that it has talked about. Say, these are austerity measures we've put in place. So people are watching for government and government officials to lead by example.
Okay, now talking about 2025 elections, we saw Chakwera being quoted in a radio interview, and he says that it will be up to the people to re-elect him in 2025 when Malawi, of course, hosts the next presidential elections. But there are also speculations that this will counter an earlier agreement with his vice Chilima, and you said it earlier on yourself that he has been stripped of his delegated powers as a vice president due to corruption scandal. So how do you see the relationship between the president and the vice?
From the looks of it outside, they're okay. Actually, today for Independence Day celebrations, prayers rather, they were together. The vice president is the one who receives the president. And so far, we have not seen anything anomalous. They seem to be okay from the body language. So we are all wondering how things are working out because of that. I wouldn't call it a suspension, but to say that he has been stopped from doing delegated duties. But so far, from the body language that we're seeing, they're still meeting, they're still okay, unless things are happening behind the scenes where there's hostility and what have you. But so far, from what we have seen publicly, there doesn't seem to be that kind of rift where they cannot even be in the same room.
Now, since independence in 1964, Mbauwo, how would you describe Malawi's relationship with international partners?
I should say Malawi has always been Westocentric. It has tried. I don't think that Malawi has been embroiled in any regional strife. We have tried to do some peacekeeping. We have peacekeepers who've been going to the DRC for some time. Our traditional relationship with the donors has been okay, though there was a point during, I think, the administration of Professor Mutharika, Professor Bingu, that is, when there was the British High Commissioner who was chased from this country. But otherwise, all the other governments, I think they've tried to toe the line. Or no, maybe that is the wrong word to use. But they've been very diplomatic. I don't think there has been a very major rift that would actually raise eyebrows as to which direction Malawi is going into.
All right, thank you so much, Mbauwo, for joining us on this conversation. And of course, a happy independence to all Malawians.
Thank you so much.
And right now we go for a quick break. And when we come back, we'll discuss the situations in Nigeria and, of course, DR Congo Rwanda tension. Do stay tuned.